I'm excited to be here to listen to these two wise women speak about this topic. I'd like to introduce our facilitators for today's program, Renee Rosario and Satoya Foster. Renee Rosario is a core faculty member of the Narrative Enneagram. A graduate of Naropa University, Renee is also a transpersonal body-centered psychotherapist in private practice in Boulder, Colorado. She has facilitated workshops and classes for 20 years and loves to teach and learn through the narrative tradition, where all are students and teachers of one another. She has also been a mindfulness instructor at Naropa University and a peacemaker trained in contemplative social action through the Peacemaker Institute. So Renee, will you say hello?
Yes, hi there. I'm so happy to be here. Excited about this opportunity. Thanks, Terry.
Mm-hmm. And Satoya Foster is a staff member with the Narrative Enneagram. She graduated with a master's degree in ministry from Richmond Graduate University, where she completed her capstone on trauma-centered spiritual formation. She has been studying and practicing the narrative tradition over the last 2.5 years. She is also a professional vocalist, writer, and trauma recovery advocate. Welcome, Satoya. Will you say hello?
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here to have this conversation today.
And I am very happy to be here hosting this and hearing about this important topic in our times. So over to you, Renee.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks for hosting and being here with us. I'm really excited to be here. And what I want to start with really is that the Narrative Enneagram's tagline is transforming lives and creating a more compassionate world. And that's really the focus of what we're trying to do here today, is to actually provide practices and methods to actually work with some of the intense energies we're navigating during these times from, of course, the pandemic and then racial justice issues. We are all navigating unbelievable amounts of inner strife, I want to say. And so we're hoping today, we're not a diversity training, but we're hoping today to share some tools as well as kind of share our experiences in working with the Enneagram and Mindfulness to try to create more resilience, more capacity for us to really kind of do the work we want to do in the world, be the change we want to see. One little sidebar is that we are not using the chat function today. If you have questions, we will do a Q&A at the end. So please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom, of your screen. So I look forward to this. And I really feel that the Enneagram and mindfulness both have such great capacities to really support us. I know I've learned the Enneagram, 25 years ago now, and my capacity to actually work with my type and see my structures has really changed my life. And then being a mindfulness practitioner for those many years as well has helped me be able to relate to what's going on. So we need to find ways to meet the inner challenges. So bringing awareness and kindness toward what is coming up in us. It's not easy, but it is kind of the invitation. How do we care internally so we can care externally? And just as we're getting started, I want to just say a couple of things, because I want to invite you during the course of our time together, if things arise, that you could practice a few tools, a few of these somatic tools. In the narrative tradition, we really work with somatic tools along with psychology and spiritualities, these three aspects in the narrative tradition. And so working with the body is kind of inherent to us being able to do something different, to follow a different path, to meet ourselves in a different way. My mindfulness teacher, who I will quote several times through here, Peter Williams, he talks about that if we really want to be present out there, that if we're 80% present internally, like we're sitting back in awareness and being able to be present with our experience, opening that field, we're actually more present out there. And that's surprising to a lot of people. So 80% in and 20% out opens the field so that we can actually receive each other. And we really want to, during this time of what feels like so much polarization and fear, anger and grief, we really want to be able to meet ourselves, and we really want to be able to be there for others. We really want to practice what we're trying to create out there. And a little cliff note, I will say, of this somatic practice is when you notice something arising, there's some thought that's disturbing or some sensations in your body, or there's a strong feeling, can you notice that and take a pause and take a breath? And then just allow yourself to kind of be present with what you're noticing. Now, it's really easy for me to say this. It's really so easy to say it out loud. Oh, it sounds simple. Very difficult, right? Because there's a lot of momentum in the energies that come up. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Enneagram and Mindfulness a little later on. But really, if we can just start to take a breath and a pause, even just for 10 seconds before the automatic pattern, before those structures just go off, that changes things. That has the potential to change things. So we can start practicing that. And again, we can look at mindfulness as kindfulness. It's a kindfulness thing to bring your attention in, to be present with yourself. We know when someone's really present with us, how good that feels. Like our system loves that, loves to feel our attention in here. And we'll work with some strategies later on around finding resources, because sometimes it really feels impossible to be present with what's going on, right? Something arises, this is my little fist metaphor here, something arises in the system, some kind of pain, discomfort, and the tendency of our ego structure in general is to swoop in to defend against that. It's not okay to feel that. Get away from it, it's wrong, but we don't want to actually just be present with what's arising. We want to get away from pain and pursue pleasure. Very basic human trait, right? But when we do that, we actually create more tension, right? It actually intensifies what's coming up. Sure, we can distract ourselves for a while. I've been doing some good distracting since we went into lockdown back in March, and it helps for a while. Sometimes until 2 in the morning when I wake up and the things that I have not been paying attention to get my attention. So we can do those things, and we will, but if we can bring some attention to the resistance, to the defensiveness, it's like this metaphor. Look, my hands look really big, don't they? Anyway, it actually creates some space for something to relax, right? So actually what was coming up has some space. And if nothing else, if we can bring some kindness and care to our experience, that really helps. Satoya, I'm wondering what you would like to add at this point.
Yeah, I wanted to add that with you talking about like really bringing kindness and care to ourselves, we need to start with ourselves so that way that's something we can do for others. We can't hold space for other people adequately till we learn how to do that for ourselves.
Yeah, yes, thank you. And can you give me an example of how you do that? What's the way you work with that?
Yeah, for me, when I feel things come up, I lead with a type 8, and so allowing is really important for me. Consenting is really important. I mean, consent is important for everybody, but for me in particular, I have to give myself the permission and give the feelings the permission, the thoughts the permission to just be what they are. And as I practice doing that work for myself, that habit generalizes to other people. And so I start to meet people with that same openness and that same compassion. And sometimes when I feel like in my type structure, I honestly just don't want to, I kind of turn a switch from resisting it to trying to find curiosity. so that way I can create space for other people.
Right. That's so well said. And I love this word you're using as being curious, like looking at the resistance and being curious. Because certainly we all have resistance. I lead with a type 2 on the Enneagram, and certainly, you know, I kind of want everybody to be okay, and I want to care for them and reach out. And that tendency to do that, if I'm not kind of grounded in myself, if I haven't done that inner peace, often isn't as helpful out there, right? And so if I could get curious about what's motivating me to take some particular action, then I have some choice, right? I can meet that. Is that really helpful? Is there something I'm just trying to avoid? I can actually avoid really easily by putting my attention on all these other things. So, and I know what some of the words you've said to me in the past is, and I'd like you to say a little more about this, Satoya, but supporting compassionate accountability as a way forward. Can you tell us more of what you mean by that?
Yeah, so when I think about compassionate accountability, a couple of different things come up for me. So it's vulnerable to allow correction. It's vulnerable for someone to hold us accountable. It's equally vulnerable to hold someone else accountable. And I don't think we talk about that aspect of things often, but it's very vulnerable to open up and say, yeah, what you just said was problematic and this is why. But that leads to another point for me is that I like to start from a place of knowing that I can be problematic. Because when I can start from the place of acknowledging how I can be problematic, then I have the humility to be able to learn and be receptive to others. And so instead of going into situations wanting to be right, wanting to say the right thing or not say the wrong thing, because sometimes not saying the wrong thing can feel more important than saying the right thing. We kind of go in with our fists closed and just kind of resisting. But if we can be compassionate to ourselves and to others, and part of connecting is accountability is a huge part of connection, right? And so if we can go in with that thought process in mind, then we all have the ability to learn, because we're not going to get this right. All of this work that we're doing, this is all messy. And it's messy here, but it's like compounded mess, right? And so based on that, in and of itself, we all have a lot to learn. We all have different kinds of learning, but compassionate accountability is an important piece of that.
I'm really touched by what you shared, because we all do have different things we need to learn in places, and how we actually give ourselves permission to be messy and to open that field. And to even, I've said this to people in the past, it's like, even if I'm reactive in this moment, just I still want to hear it, and I will be back, right? I will work with it, because sometimes the pattern just comes up and we feel reactive against what we've been told, or what we need to say, or how we were received or not. So we just have to have space for all of that during this time, to really find our way, to really listen and to be present with each other. During this time, Satoya, I've talked about this as a horrific opportunity, this time that we're in. And I actually appreciate what those two words together say, because there is a lot of horror going on, from the latest, biggest piece of racial injustice with George Floyd being murdered, to the pandemic that is just affecting many people on many different levels, some worse than others, etc. But it's a horrific time, and we cannot turn away from that, right? We have to be able to be present with that. But it's an opportunity, because what happens, it's like what I've been thinking for years is like, how we're doing this life and with climate change, right? There's the existential thing that's also on the background. Like we can't, this isn't sustainable, inequity, the rich getting richer, I mean, just everything that's been happening. And I never imagined it would look like this. But chaos, I had a spiritual teacher years ago that said chaos should be considered extremely good news. Now, maybe that person was a positive outlook type. If you're into the Enneagram, you might know what I mean, but chaos breaks things up, right? Our structures are getting broken up. And it's through that breakup that actually allows something new to get built. And that's what, when people say, I want to go back, I want to just get back to normal, it's like, oh, please no. Let's not go back to that normal. Let's create actually new potentials. And it's going to be difficult and painful. But it is an opportunity. And I feel committed to that, to playing whatever little part I do in that. So it's a horrific opportunity. Satoya, what comes up for you with those words?
A few things come up for me. The thing that's most present in my mind, though, is anyone that has ever had to do, and I love my descriptions. Anyone that has ever had to do any kind of home improvement can understand a horrific opportunity. Like you're like, oh, we're gonna redo this bathroom. It's only gonna cost X amount of dollars. Like, it's great. We have our budget, and we also did a little cushion, and we have all of our fixtures and everything. And then the person that comes to do the work, they pull it up, and then they come to you and they're like, yeah, so you need new pipes and your electric is shot. So all these things come up, but it does present an opportunity, right? It presents this opportunity where it's like, okay, this is really challenging. This is blowing our budget. We don't have this, but it presents an opportunity to say, hey, we noticed that this wiring wasn't done well before, but now we have the opportunity to get it right. Now we have the opportunity to look at what was there, what wasn't done well, what was fractured, what was broken, what was missing, and we can do something with that, And I think a big part of that opening is the acknowledgement of what it is. And once you can acknowledge, then you can do the work. You have the opportunity to do the work to move forward.
I always do love your metaphors, and that was a very good one. I will say this from an Enneagram point of view, I think body types do the best metaphors. They can speak in these kind of images and stories that really convey so much. So thank you for sharing that. And it kind of leads into this idea too of why the Enneagram is so helpful. I'm going to talk about the Enneagram a little bit. We'll have some more discussion, and then mindfulness and how those work together. But that actually the Enneagram is so good because we really have already started exploring. If you're here, you're probably already into the Enneagram. You've found it have some value. But it really asks us to explore unconscious mechanisms, right? And it does that from a point of view of we all have conditioning. We are all conditioned creatures, right? So since we were born, we have started to learn things from the outside. All the different ways we learn. That's what we know. Babies learn from their caregivers, their peers, their schools, from our cultures, our religious backgrounds, our ethnicities, etc. We learn things. And in the Enneagram, we really talk about, it's like you have a pattern, but you're more than a pattern. So we said, I lead with 2, you lead with 8, Satoya, and it's just, so we have a pattern. And it takes this piece of, it's so easy right now to actually, like I watch my own implicit bias, racist ideas, like you cannot grow up in this culture with having some of that conditioning. And how I work with that is my choice. right? If I can actually notice those thoughts or notice my unconscious patterns relative to my type or relative to this very difficult issue, then I have some choice about how I respond, right? And so the Enneagram gives us some choice. And we can also take responsibility for it without actually beating ourselves up for it. It's learned. That's what we mean by conditioned. Learned experiences, learned behavior. I learned through my predisposition to be a 2 to actually, because I have a kind of gift for this too, reaching out and being helpful, right? And I learned that, and I learned certain feedback I got for doing that, positive and negative, of course. But these are learned things, and if it's learned, it can be unlearned, right? We can actually meet it, and again, back to kindfulness and care, we can bring awareness to it and have some kindness when something difficult arises in this conditioned mind of ours, in our conditioned responses too, right? Our nervous system learns. It learns to behave and respond in a particular way. And it's around survival. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if we have some choice about how to respond, you know, that is the gift. And so if you've been working with the Enneagram, you already have some of this capacity because you've already started meeting things that, you know, when you start seeing it in the beginning in the Enneagram world, it's like, oh my God, I had no idea, you know, all I do is take care of everybody and nobody appreciates me. I said that in therapy for 1.5 years in my mid-20s. And after 1.5 years, I went, oh my God, I'm trying to get something here. This is a deal. I'm trying to get them to take care of me or love me or appreciate me. So the Enneagram would have helped save a bunch of money relative to 1.5 years of therapy. But anyway, still grateful for that. So it can help us meet these things that come up that are not our choice, but it is our responsibility, and we are accountable for how we respond to it. And then we do that with some care and kindness. So around, you know, implicit bias, conditioning, these are all very similar parts of the same bundle. Satoya, what would you have to add to this?
I feel like what you said was all stated very well. And I feel like almost to add anything would be to remove the beauty of what you said.
Thank you. That's kind. And since I'm doing this right now as a 2, I'm a heart center type, of course, and so I find myself doing this a lot. So I'm just putting my hand on my heart, and it's just a beautiful way to bring some kindness towards self, to actually receive when someone gives you a compliment, because that can be hard too. That can be hard to take in. It can be hard to feel the negative stuff, hard to let in the good stuff, the positive stuff. And it's also, I found out after I've done this for some time, it's called a heart hug. And this heart hug, what I hear, releases oxytocin, which is the relational hormone that has to do with caring and caring for an infant. So it's a little bit like, and what we feel like when we get to give hugs, which I so miss. Can I just say how much I miss hugging people? So we give ourselves a little hug. So thank you, Satoya, for that. So I want to say just a little something now about mindfulness more in general. We're going to talk about that for a few minutes. We will be doing an inner practice towards the end, just to kind of integrate some of the mindfulness ideas. But with mindfulness practice, what we're really trying to do is to actually be able to be present with how things are in the moment. That's kind of the bottom line. Can I be present with how things are? My teacher says, you know, transforming emotional reactivity to mindfulness of feelings. Right? If we can actually, instead of, we notice anger is coming up, that's not a problem, right? It's like, it isn't about getting rid of anything, but it's like, if I can notice it and be with it, then I can actually use it for productive action. I can actually use it. And I'll say more about these 3 core emotions in a minute. But really what we're trying to do is getting out of the automatic driving reactivity that tends to run the type. And I tell you, given all the stress that we are under every day here, whatever other stuff happens personally, you know, relative to all these other big issues, we're already like at the mountaintop of stress, right? So really, mindfulness is not about getting rid of anything. It's not about just being like apathetic or chill. It is nothing about that. It's being able to have some kindness, some equanimity toward what you're experiencing so that you have some choice on how to respond, right? So, and if you haven't practiced like actually meeting things as they are, it can be scary, right? To go inside. And I know, you know, Satoya, you've talked about this, and maybe you can add in here about learning to go in.
Yeah, as you were talking about mindfulness, I was thinking about all the people that might say, huh, yeah, well, it's really hard, and it seems like other people are so much better at it. I mean, who am I to give you permission? But I'm going to do it anyway. I give you permission to just like feel the resistance and to let it feel awkward and to let it be frustrating, because that is a part of meeting yourself where you are. For me, I have a lot of resistance internally when I try to notice and create space for myself, because I have a propensity to want to do. When I have a feeling that comes up, what happens for me is, oh, what can I do with this feeling? Not quite what feelings are for, not quite what emotions are for, but that is how I react. I have a feeling, I need to do something to get rid of that feeling quickly. And for me, that turns it into action. How can I act? What can I do? But if I can just sit with it and allow, and to be honest, there are some moments where sitting with it doesn't even work for me, because I have a background of developmental trauma. And so with that background, sometimes creating the space feels more harmful in the moment. And so what I've learned how to do is how to integrate a little bit of activity to work with my type structure and to work with who I am, in order to help me to incrementally move toward that space. And what that looks like for me is sometimes when I just need to kind of notice, like I know something's happening and I feel a little, I call it buzzy. Like I feel like I'm just kind of like buzzing. I'll do embroidery stitching, because it's an activity that I can do, but it's not an activity that I have to throw all of myself into, and it still allows me to have space. Or knitting, because it still allows space, and I can do a repetitive action that doesn't require a lot of attention, where I can use that extra attention to really create some room for myself.
Thank you. Yeah, it's such a good point. You know, you know, in the Enneagram, we talk about going in and down, and mindfulness, being present with what is. And sometimes it's really, it isn't actually the best choice relative to past trauma, things that are going on. And so we find ways, and when we do the practice, we'll just do it about finding something that's okay in your body versus going towards the discomfort. So I so appreciate sharing. It's like there are other things you can do that actually don't just take you totally away, like doing something as you've shared. It's really brilliant. And sometimes going for a walk, calling a friend, you know, there are other forms of resources that we can use. So mindfulness really is about moving from reactivity to response. And I really see those 2 words very different. One's automatic and one feels more like a choice. I'm going to respond in this way. And I, you know, given that John Lewis has left this earth recently, he's such a model, I think, for this, of speaking truth, of not being, in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about idiot's compassion, which is just being nice, versus like being, I like this image of ferocious compassion. Like I'm willing to stand up, to state the truth, and I'm still willing to be in relationship and hold you and respect you. That we can do both those things. And in the mindfulness tradition, we talk a lot about how do we do that? How do we actually have compassion for everybody? Because it's some difficult with some beings on the planet, for some of us, to have compassion, right? But we separate actor from action. I remember after 9/11, I went to a panel here in Colorado, and this journalist said, and it was a panel, and there's a lot of racism against Muslims that came out after this, et cetera, of blanketing people into a group again, which is what the tendency in our culture is to do, white, black, this tradition, that tradition, or religion. But this woman said, terrorists are not born, they're forged. And that, I have remembered that. It's been, 19 years almost, that she said that. Conditioning, what happened to someone to actually have them be this way? If we do well-wishing for people, like may all beings be healthy, happy, safe, and free, I think actually a lot of people that are forged in a different way, if they had those things, they wouldn't be reacting in the same way, right? So we develop compassion by separating actor, who somebody is, with their behavior, and we hold them very much responsible for their behavior, right? We get held responsible for our behavior, but it doesn't make us a bad person, an evil person, right? So that's a real core thing around how we develop more compassion, and that leaves space for reconciliation. There is the possibility of reconciling, these different polarities, if we actually can hold, the fact that we're all, in a sense, products of our environment, and that there's something deeper in us. There is witnessing consciousness, God, awareness, the ground of being, whatever you want to call it spiritually. We are something more than our conditioned patterns and responses. We like to quote Viktor Frankl occasionally and say, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is the place where both the Enneagram and mindfulness can really help us make a different choice. We can see our repetitive pattern. We can see our biases based on our type, biases based on our race, upbringing, family of origin, socioeconomic status, gender expression. Just fill in the blank there, right? But we can have some choice about how we respond. And I know we've said this about 5 different ways now, but it's important. And that's really how we change things. Neuroplasticity, understanding neuroscience, neural pathways have the possibility of being modified, of creating new pathways. But that means we have to choose to move toward and our experience and feel what's going on. I always love to tell this little quote, or this little scientific study I stumbled on some years ago, that the conscious brain can be aware of about 25 to 40 bits of information per second. And that we receive through the unconscious in the body 11 million bits of information per second. Now, if you just actually let that sink in for a moment, how much we're privileging and all the information we have to discard because we cannot, the conscious mind can't digest that, right? And so we're all, as often as quoted, we're all correct, we're all right in our perspective, and we're all wrong because we're limited. It's partial, right? And so we really want to hear, this is where diversity in every way is such a gift, because you get all these other different points of view, right? We learn something. And the possibility of us learning is really necessary right now, right? really necessary. I just feel like taking a pause and just feeling a little bit of that energy of how important it is that we step up to this particular work so we can do other work for social change. Is there anything you want to add here?
Yeah, with you saying that, I think that it's important to acknowledge that a big part of the work is learning how to, especially when it comes to the awareness piece and being able to observe ourselves. A big part of it is this like dance between stepping up and stepping back. It's important to move forward. It's important to address things. It's important to hold powers and people accountable. And at the same time, this work is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so because of that, we have to create space so that way we can figure out when it's time for us to move back and develop enough trust amongst our community that we can allow space for others to move forward. Part of our work is to sustain ourselves throughout this marathon. And so I haven't run a marathon before, but I would imagine that if I did, I probably wouldn't want to run as fast as I could in the first 5 minutes. And I think that that's really important, that like that trust of our learning to trust ourselves when it's time to step back, and learning to trust our communities to be able to step forward. And then when it's time, we also step forward, and just kind of participate in that dance.
Thank you. Yes, I love that. I was also thinking that if we were training or we were going to run a marathon, we'd be in training and we would fall and we would get exhausted and there would be pain in our body, and we would kind of stay with it, because it's training. So I feel like, to tag onto what you said, we're in training right now, and my guess is we're going to be in training for a while. And so we need to do it in a way that's sustainable. I want to say just a few more things. And I just want to talk about anger, fear, and grief. And I want to say grief/shame, which is oriented in the Enneagram around the 3 centers of intelligence. So we think of the body center folks, the primary emotional issue that comes up, triggered or et cetera, is anger. And anger gets a really bad rap. It's a territorial, from an evolutionary point of view, it's a territorial response to protect your young, what you value, your territory, so it's in us as mammals to actually protect what's important. So anger comes up as an important messenger now, right? And so I think, what we want to do again is be able to work with it so that it isn't just kind of running the show, but we also need to know that it's trying to give us really important messages. And if we can actually just kind of sense it in our body and kind of be with it, we might find out more than it's just whatever that person did out there. But there is something I really value that I want to stand for, that I want to stand up for, speak for, right? Fear, the head center triad, right? Fear is the emotional response that comes up. And that's a really important thing to protect our survival, to run away, to manage, to try to figure out what's coming down the line, to try to predict things. And if there is, I don't know, I'm sure in just times I don't know, but there is just a bucket load of uncertainty. Uncertainty is everywhere. We don't know really when this virus issue will be over. We have years to go on getting equity and inclusion issues sorted, who knows? So being able to actually like understand that this is uncertain and have some kindness and to find resources when we need it, when we're scared and the fear is coming up. Because even though, you know, these are primary for certain types, we all have them, right? So again, fear, to run from danger, is very natural from an evolutionary point of view. It's important, right? And in the past, we might say, you know, at least some of us made things up, but, you know, I don't think anybody's making anything up anymore. It is a scary, uncertain time, and we have to be able to work with ourselves. And then we think of the heart triad as often called grief or panic, the loss of contact. And we're, you know, we're social animals, and contact is really important, right? It's a survival strategy. Being part of the herd is a survival strategy, right? And so when you don't feel approved of, and I'll say something about this, or connected, it can feel very panicky, right? Very panicky. And it can also induce this feeling of shame, you know, and we've seen, you know, actually mammals that show shame when they do something wrong. They turn over, they expose their belly, they try to get back in, you know, and so being able to work with that. I mean, as a two, I think I said this earlier, but you know, I want to feel connected, and it can be really scary for me when I'm disconnected. Like fear comes up there too, but it's grief and loss. And I have to say, during this time of being so isolated, that's been a really big deal for me. I'm a social type too, and like I rely on being with people, and it feels good, and I get nourished, and then I do want to go home and be alone, but it's too much alone, right? It's been too much alone. And so working with that loneliness factor and trying to connect here and trying to do socially safe kind of activities with friends is important. So I just wanted to give a little overview of those things. So those are the challenging feelings. But now I have the question of, during this time when there's so many people suffering, is it okay to feel happy, to feel joyful, peaceful, have a good day, right? Because sometimes it might feel like it's not okay. There's too many people suffering, right? So I want to ask you that first, Satoya. What would you say about that?
I think that more than it just being okay, I also think that it is vital for people to embrace joy and for people to embrace gratitude, because we all, especially if we're looking at how we connect communally, it's important for us to be able to have space for each other, and we can't make space for each other without having gratitude and without being able to embrace joy, even if it's difficult. And also not embracing that when it comes up for us, it completely disconnects us from ourselves if that's where we are. And furthermore, for me, it can be hard for me personally to engage joy and things like that when basically things are falling like just around me, everything's just crumbling. But I wish I could remember who said this, but it resonated so deeply for me, leading with a type 8, that gratitude and joy and all of those things are an act of resistance. And I'm like, I could do that. I could do some resistance. I'm good with that. And so I think it is okay for people to be happy. I do think it's okay for people to find peace and to find gratitude, because those are a part of the things that we need to move forward, right? Like, we don't want everything to crumble and explode and implode and then explode again. That's not what we're working toward. We're working toward not this weird utopia where everything just becomes homogenous, but like for everyone to be embraced and loved and belong, right? And in order for us to get to that place, we have to make space for joy. We have to make space for gratitude. And Auntie Brene Brown always talks about how, you can't separate those emotions. You can't want to move forward and do this work and not create space for joy. Even though it's scary for me personally, because I think about the way that I feel joy in my body is very similar to the way that I feel grief in my body. But yet still, it's vital that I still engage it. And I would challenge everyone to do the same.
Well, I'm going to return the compliment now and say I don't need to add anything to that. That was very well said, and I thank you for that, and I totally concur. The world needs our love, our happiness, our gratitude. We need to add that to the atmosphere, actually. Right? Yeah. Thank you. So with that place, let's do a little inner practice. So wherever you are, and I really am grateful so many of you are here and sharing this with us, and hope it's helpful for you. So if you're comfortable, I just want you to actually kind of wiggle around in your chair. And you can either let your eyes be in a soft gaze or just gently let them close. And sense gravity and just the weight of your body in whatever you're sitting in, chair, couch, if you're lying down. Can you notice the contact between your seat and maybe your lower back? This simple movement of attention, where we move from out, paying attention out, and watching the screen, and just actually shifting the attention in. That is actually our true power, to be able to put our attention where we want. And that's a practice. So can you just sense your body in the chair for a moment? Can you sense your feet on the floor? Can you allow a breath to invite you in? This breath that's always present in the moment, that breathes us alive every day, every night. Can you just notice how the breath moves through the body? And as thoughts arise or some other tension or feeling in the body, you can just note that. This is part of that cliff note. You can notice, oh, there's a thought. Can you notice it and shift your attention back for now to the breath? We might shift our attention over and over again. And that's fine. That is building a muscle of our capacity for putting our attention where we want. It's not about not thinking or feeling or sensing, it's just shifting. So we use the breath as an anchor for our attention. There's something to come back to. And if you've had experience with inner practice or not, there is no right or wrong. It's why it's called practice. We're just trying to meet ourselves where we are, or where we choose, which is now the breath for these few moments. As you exhale, can you feel your body settle more into the chair? Be really noticing the exhalation. We often want to kind of really feel the breath move through our torso fully, all the way apparently into the lower abdomen, the deep belly. And for some, that's easier than others. But if you can let your front be soft. Another Zen teacher, John Halifax, activist, talks about strong back, soft front. Can you feel your back kind of supporting you? Like we have this inner strength. And can you let yourself in the front be soft so we can be receptive to what we're experiencing internally, receptive to another. Can we let our bellies be soft? And that might not feel safe. And if it's not, bring your attention back to your seat in the chair. Just notice the contact. So oftentimes when we have to get away, we can find a resource inside. It could be just sensing our feet on the ground, walking on the earth. It could be finding any place in the body that isn't reactive. It could be your pinky finger where you put your attention, which can help the nervous system to relax. So there's more, obviously, to share in these inner practices, but for this short time, just allowing yourself to notice whatever's there. Follow the breath. And in this place, I'd like you to drop an inquiry. How would you like to be changed by this historic time? How might that change be of service in the world? What capacities would you like to grow? What would you like to let go of? How would you like to be changed by this time? Just notice whatever might come up in body, heart, or mind. And if you don't notice anything, that's fine. Maybe it's an inquiry you contemplate later. Change is afoot. How do you respond? So taking another breath. And letting your eyes come on open. I'm recognizing we're really at our time, so just briefly, I'm gonna just share something that came up for me before we go to our questions and Q&A time, and then to Satoya, if you would. But when I dropped that question in, I just felt my heart open, like I just want more open-heartedness, more care. I want to be present.
What came up for me was two things: allowing myself to be softer, to allow the soft. And then the second thing was allowing myself to share when I feel afraid. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. So right before we go to our questions and answers, we are going to potentially go to about a quarter after the hour, just to let you know. But some of you might be jumping off, and I just want to say and remind you that the Narrative Enneagram is a nonprofit dedicated to doing the kind of work we're doing, to training other people, to this kind of transforming lives and creating a more compassionate world. So we really appreciate your donations. And thank you for that. And when you go to do a donation, if you haven't, and you would like to, what's this for? If you put in social change, we'll know it's really a donation relative to this webinar. I also want to say that my mindfulness teacher, Peter Williams, and I, he's also a colleague, we've been doing Enneagram and Mindfulness classes for several years locally, and we are going to expand on what we did today in a one-day class that will include periods of sitting as well as panel work on November 21st. So if you want to save the date, November 21st, the Saturday, and there'll be more information coming. So thank you. And Terry, back to you.
Yes, thank both of you. I just so appreciate your realness and your honesty and your interest in this and bringing these tools to this arena of social change. And the first person, this is their question. I love Satoya's honesty about sitting with the feeling, not acting on it. It reminds me of the importance of silence for the head types, solitude for the heart types, and stillness for body types. P.S. I learned this from Ginger Lapid-Bogda. Mindfulness for me is to practice in all three states. Since we have all three centers represented here, could each of you speak about this connection to silence, solitude, and stillness in your own practice as a head type, heart type, or body type? So Satoya, what about you and stillness?
So you're just gonna plot the hard questions. Is that what we're doing? Holy smokes. Stillness it's really hard for me. I am completely okay with silence. I am completely okay with solitude, but the act of not doing anything is an incredible challenge for me. I attempt to practice, and as I mentioned before, a lot of my practice looks like integrating low activity because I haven't gotten to the place yet. Like, I'm nobody's guru is all I'm saying. Like, I haven't gotten to the place where I can just I'm at a complete peace and zen or whatever it is you want to call it. I'm not there. But I integrate low activity because that's where I am.
Beautiful, thank you. How about you, Renee, and solitude?
Wasn't I just talking about this with Satoya? It's like, it's not easy. I mean, it's like, I love it, but not too much of it. So, and I keep, Jack Kornfield, who's another mindfulness teacher, said at some point, he said that this is when the pandemic first started. He was talking to a group of Chinese practitioners in mindfulness, and he said, this virus isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. People pay a lot of money to go on retreat and be by themselves. It's happening, you know? So I keep having that go through my head, and but it's hard. And I've got a lot of the doing thing too, I have to say, you know. So I know this is my practice. I mean, that's what I know. And that's why it's hard, because it's a practice.
And we each keep coming back, right? It's not about getting there, right? It's about returning this mindfulness. And as a head type, silence, oh my Lord, I've often said, could I please have a switch on my brain to turn it off? Because it just like goes. So coming in and down, and I think ultimately all of the centers, when one of these we have all of them, right? They're all there. So thank you. The next question is, could you each share an example of how the Enneagram and mindfulness or mindfulness have you used in a social action environment or situation where you actually consciously kind of used this when a situation was tense or in real life? Does anything come to mind?
Yes. So I was in a meeting where it was a meeting where racial issues were being discussed, and I was one of 2 Black people in the room, and a conversation came up that was like a really touchy subject, and I stopped and checked in with myself. And the thing that indicated to me that I needed to stop and check in with myself was I started feeling very irritable, and I felt my type structure just constrict, and I started to feel really angry, justifiably angry, but enough for me to be like, oh, what's going on? And so when I checked in with myself, what I felt was, I don't need to be in this room. Because in that moment, I realized it was more important for the white people in the room to bear witness to each other without my presence. And then I also needed to create safety for myself in the middle of that conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. How about you, Renee?
Yeah, I want to say, just as kind of historically, when I did this year-long peacemaker training, part of the reason I joined that, because I would get so angry. This was like the build-up. This is after 9/11, the build-up to the war in Iraq, the start of the war in Afghanistan, and I was uncontrollable. Someone said something that I thought was, wrong, and I was just like all over them. It was like, it created so much like discomfort. I felt so righteous in the moment. And then I felt like, okay, how's this helping? I probably didn't convince them of my point of view because I was yelling at them. Actually, that doesn't work, right? So that's what I recall. And more recently, it's been really hard for me, but I have not been in the streets, even with Black Lives Matter, even though I've wanted to, just age and concern relative to the virus. But I would say what I noticed, I was walking in my neighborhood one day, and I just rent the bottom part of this house. So it's pretty, it's like a mother-in-law unit, but I live up in the foothills of Boulder, right? And it's quite wealthy, and there's a lot of big houses all around. And I was for a walk on a street, and like a nice car, like a Lexus or something, was driving down the road toward me. And I've started like waving to everybody these days, like stopping to have conversations and waving and trying to make connection. And I saw, this is one of those things, and I'm going to practice right now. I saw a woman sitting in the passenger seat who looked like a Latina. And my first thought in my mind was, I wonder if she works up here. And it was like, wow. It's hard to see these things. And I took accountability for it. And I tried to bring some kindness to it. And I saw I want to swear, like, what the fuck do I know? Like, I don't know who this person is, but that's the kind of activism right now that I'm doing, is with my own attention and care.
And as Satoya said earlier, it's going to be messy as we all do this, as we all try to bring our conscious, unconscious biases, like you just named so authentically, Renee. It's going to be messy and hard, and we're going to do it. And we're going to do it. Thank you for sharing. And one of our participants asked, the Enneagram is a powerful tool for personal transformation, yet I see few persons of color in our trainings. What can those of us in the narrative community, Enneagram community, do to encourage more diversity?
Well, I'll just start. As an organization, we are really looking at our diversity and inclusion issues, and there's several things. We have a scholarship program, but we've actually created a diversity initiative. So we've been actually bringing people into the training, people of color, for free, and especially people that want to share it. It really has been a white privileged organization. I mean, the Enneagram in general, right? Not just our organization, white privileged organization, and it's something we're aware of and trying to actively work with. And I think one of the benefits of going online is that it's cheaper, because if you had to leave work, pay site cost, airfare, etc., like it's just going to eliminate a certain, whatever race you're part of, a certain stratum of the potential students. So we have people showing up more from all over the world, actually, in our trainings. And so I feel very encouraged by that. And we're just trying to do our work, right? We're trying to do our work. So Satoya, you might have something else to offer.
No, I feel like you covered it.
Yeah. But I want us to focus on what our community can do. What advice do you have for we're trying to do it inside, but what can our community do?
In terms of like what I think the community can do is, I think that people that have the knowledge of the Enneagram make a point of going into other communities. Gosh, I even hate the way I said that. I don't want to say other communities. That sounds terrible. I'm just going to check myself on that. But I think that people that have the knowledge of the Enneagram spread out yes. from where they typically are, and share that knowledge with other people. Share that knowledge with people.
With all people.
All people, yes. It's you can see how the othering is so ingrained, right? But that's obviously part of the work. But anyway, I think that it's important for our community to go out and share with all people. Yes. So that way, the Enneagram isn't something that is for the privileged few that can afford it, and I mean, another really great way actually would be to donate to places that are doing that work. Like this whole webinar was put forth on donation. So if you want to give to that work, this would be a great place to give to that work, because then we can bring people in, bring in diverse communities. That's a great place to do that. So maybe you don't feel like you want to teach, but what you can do is you can empower those that are teaching.
Great. Thank you. Good. We're all in this together. Satoya, is there a process we should go through to determine if it's safe enough to share? How can we distinguish between feeling unsafe and feeling uncomfortable?
That's a great question. I think that highlights the importance of learning how to check in with ourselves, because if we do that and if we check in with ourselves, but if we also create space for that inner awareness, that inner observer, then we can determine whether we feel personally safe enough to share or not. Any person that shares, I don't want to say should, because I don't want to create shame around that for anyone, but anyone that chooses to share something, it would be a good practice to share based on your current level of comfort. And so if you feel uncomfortable, you feel any sense of discomfort, I mean, yeah, sometimes we feel discomfort because we're trying to grow into something or grow out of something, but that's something that I think each person needs to resource themselves and decide which way that's going for them. And I mean, if you find that you, after the fact, feel like you judged incorrectly for yourself, then give yourself the grace and the space to acknowledge that and then to move forward.
Great. Do you want to add anything, Renee?
Yeah, I just want to add that, like, right now, really, like, it's like that edge, right? Like, we want to push ourselves. You know, I've been noticing a lot of my attachment to my comfort, for instance, you know, and so I want to push myself, and I also want to be really gentle with myself, right? So I just think during this time when we're coping with so much, that we really have to be discerning about that edge and cut ourselves some slack. If we can't do it now, fine, don't do it now, right? Like, as you know, Satoya said earlier, we're on a marathon, right? So
Yeah, and the best choices, as you've both been talking about, is pausing. Pausing gives you a lot of information that you won't have if we just go on automatic. Our little shorthand: notice, pause, allow. A lot of things can change in that quote space that's right there.
and maybe you need to get up and go to the, like, excuse yourself if you're in the midst of something and go to the bathroom and get by yourself for 2 minutes. And, like, okay, let me remove myself from that, so I'm not sitting in the midst of it, to actually get more discernment, you know.
All right, we have a lot more questions, but we only have time for one. And this is the final question. You've spoken to this already, but wondering what final words for today you would have to activists who are deeply committed, sacrificing for a cause that contains enormous suffering and for which change comes slowly. How not to harden, how to remain hopeful, how to rejuvenate, how to stay resilient. What would each of you say to that?
I would say the first thing that comes up in my mind is rest. But beyond that, I think that it's important for people that engage in this kind of work to continue to get to know themselves deeper, because the more we know ourselves, the better we can care for ourselves. And then you can process through what you might need. Because I can't really tell you what you need. You best, like, you are your own guru. Like, I can't tell you how to best take care of yourself, but what I can tell you is, if you look inward and you get to know yourself deeply in terms of what you love and what you don't, and what feels good to you and what doesn't feel good to you, then you can find things that are restful or rejuvenative for you.
Beautiful. Renee?
Yeah, and what I would say is, first of all, thank you for being an activist and being out there and doing this good work. And I don't think we can avoid anything, unfortunately. I don't think we can avoid getting tired, noticing the heart hardening at times, being frustrated, the results take too long. Like, that's just part of the deal. You know, at the end, you use the word resilience, and that's what I would say. It's like, what do you need to do to develop resilience? I remember when I was years ago, I saw this sign, and I can't say it well. It was in the bathroom of a Quaker church, and that's where we would meet sometimes, and because there was so many activists in that church, and it was like something like, watch for the violence you're creating, you're directing toward yourself if you're not taking care of yourself too, right? It's a kind of, that's a kind of violence as well. And I know it can be very hard to say no, to back up, to take time off, but we just need to somehow be at peace that we're gonna be stressed. There's no way to defend against anything. Can we meet it? Can we respond in a way that's caring?
Thank you so much, both of you, for your deep caring and your deep sharing and your deep commitment to this work. I want to just add one thing to this question of what else can you do? You can be part of communities that are supportive of this kind of work. And if you're not already a member of our narrative community, Evangeline has put the link to join. We meet at least monthly. I'm having a meeting this Thursday, if you're for members of our community, where we just come together and give each other space to be where we are. And again, I want to remind you of the webinar Renee and Peter Williams, her mindfulness teacher, will be doing on November 21st. You'll hear more about that. And as many of you suggested, a way to support this work is through donations to our organization or others that support this work. And we hope you'll do that to whatever means you can. It's been an honor to be here with you, with our participants. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you another time. Keep looking at our website for new courses and new offerings, and take good care of yourself and each other.